The first thing they automated was my birthday reminder. Not payroll. Not compliance reviews. Not the forecasting pipeline I'd spent 6 years building from scratch. My birthday reminder. At exactly 9:02 a.m., my screen lit up with a cheerful little Slack notification from something called Syntrapulse AI. Happy work anniversary, Callum Vale. Your contributions matter. 2 minutes later, my boss called me into a conference room to tell me my position had been eliminated. Yeah. That didn't sit right. I still remember the sound the chair made when I pulled it out. Cheap steel legs scraping polished concrete. Nobody spoke while I sat down. Celine Voss sat across from me in a cream blazer that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. Beside her was Nolan Price from finance pretending not to look uncomfortable. And on the wall behind them? A giant presentation slide. Operational efficiency through AI integration. Real subtle. Celine folded her hands like she was about to tell me someone had passed away. Callum, we've decided to move in a different direction. Of course they had. Companies never fire people anymore. They streamline. They restructure. They optimize human capital. Makes it sound cleaner. Like layoffs come with eucalyptus candles and spa music. I just nodded slowly. Got it. Celine almost looked disappointed I wasn't emotional. See, people like Celine need reactions. It feeds something in them. She leaned back slightly. The new system can handle most client operations automatically now. We simply don't need as much manual oversight. Manual oversight. That was cute. Because the manual oversight she was talking about was me catching mistakes that would have cost the company millions over the years. But I'd learned something important working corporate for over a decade. The louder someone talks about innovation, the less they usually understand the thing they're replacing. I left with a cardboard box and half a protein bar from my desk drawer. Nobody looked at me on the way out. Not because they hated me. Because they were scared. Corporate offices are basically adult middle schools with better lighting. My friend Morel texted me before I even hit the parking garage. You okay? I stared at the message for a second. Then typed. Yeah. Just got replaced by a robot. Living the dream. She called immediately. That bad? I got into my car and sat there with the engine off while people in expensive jackets walked past pretending they weren't listening. They think the AI can run client logistics without human review. Morel went quiet. Oof. Exactly. See, I worked for Norvex Meridian. Mid-sized supply chain consulting company outside Chicago. Not glamorous, but complicated enough that small mistakes became expensive very fast. And my entire job was preventing those small mistakes. Contract conflicts. Regional regulation mismatches. Inventory forecasting issues. Vendor reliability scoring. Stuff nobody noticed when it worked. Only when it exploded. The problem with executives is they mistake invisible work for unnecessary work. Celine especially. She'd joined the company 18 months earlier after some flashy tech startup acquisition. Always wore sharp white sneakers with business suits like she was legally obligated to remind everyone she'd once heard a podcast. She loved saying words like disruption. Loved LinkedIn. Loved audiences. And she absolutely loved taking credit. For months, she'd been publicly minimizing my team's work. We need scalable intelligence. We can't rely on old operational instincts forever. Human bottlenecks slow innovation. Every meeting was basically a TED Talk held hostage. I swallowed a lot of pride during those months. Smiled through it. Took notes. Watched. Because here's the thing about arrogant people. They always show you where the weak spots are. You just have to stay quiet long enough to see them. 3 weeks before I got fired, Celine pushed through the full AI transition despite multiple internal warnings. Mine included. Especially mine. I documented specific risk patterns the system consistently missed. Vendor fraud indicators. Regional shipping anomalies. Seasonal forecasting distortions. The AI was fast. But it had no judgment. And judgment is expensive to replace. Celine ignored every concern. At one meeting, she actually smiled and said, "You're thinking emotionally, Callum. The data speaks for itself." I almost laughed. Because I'd built half the damn data structure. But again, I stayed calm. That's what bothered her most. No outbursts. No pleading. Just observation. A week after my termination, Morel came over with Thai food and a bottle of cheap wine. "You look weirdly relaxed," she said. "I'm unemployed. I can finally sleep." She smirked. "You're plotting something." "No," I said honestly. "I'm waiting." There's a difference. Plotting is emotional. Waiting is strategic. And honestly, I expected the system to struggle. I didn't expect it to collapse that fast. The first sign came from an old coworker named Dorian Keel. He called me at almost midnight. "Dude," he whispered immediately. "Why are you whispering?" "Because this place is turning into a funeral home." I leaned back on my couch. Apparently the AI had started approving vendor substitutions without proper compliance checks. Then it missed a contract escalation clause tied to fuel indexing. Then inventory prediction started over-ordering medical refrigeration units in southern regions while understocking northern warehouses. Individually, fixable. Together, catastrophic. The problem was the AI optimized for patterns, not context. And supply chains are basically organized chaos held together by exhausted adults and instinct. By the second month, major clients were furious. Missed deliveries. Penalty fees. Compliance investigations. One client reportedly threatened legal action after temperature-sensitive pharmaceuticals were routed incorrectly across state lines. That's when the board got involved. Funny how quickly innovation meetings turn into accountability meetings once rich people start losing money. Dorian kept feeding me updates. Quietly. Apparently Celine doubled down at first. Blamed legacy systems. Blamed transition resistance. Blamed former employees who failed to adapt. Which, honestly, was my favorite part. Because every time someone asked technical questions during executive meetings, she kept referencing documentation I wrote. Documentation she barely understood. Then came the trigger. The mistake that finally cracked everything open. Celine approved a full removal of manual compliance verification to increase operational speed. No human review. Pure AI execution. I actually stared at my phone when Dorian told me. "Wait," I said slowly. "Completely removed?" "Yep." I stood up from my couch. Because now it wasn't just arrogance. Now it was ego overriding basic operational safety. And ego always gets expensive eventually. 3 days later, a major retail client received conflicting shipment allocations across 4 states during a nationwide rollout. Millions in inventory got trapped in routing loops. Warehouses overloaded. Deliveries stalled. Social media complaints exploded. One regional manager apparently described it as watching a Roomba drive through a minefield. That line made me laugh harder than it should have. The board scheduled an emergency meeting that same week. And that's when I got the email. Not from Celine. From the board chairman himself. Subject line. Request for operational consultation. I stared at it for a long moment. Morel looked over from the kitchen. Well? I shrugged. Took them long enough. The meeting happened on a rainy Thursday downtown. Same building. Same elevators. Same stupid lavender air freshener in the lobby. Only difference? People looked at me now. I walked into the executive conference room wearing the same navy suit Celine once mocked as aggressively practical. She was already seated. And for the first time since I'd met her. She looked tired. No performance energy. No polished confidence. Just stress. The board chairman, Alaric Thorne, gestured for me to sit. Callum, he said carefully, we'd like your assessment of the situation. Celine crossed her arms immediately. Here we go. I opened the reports calmly. Didn't grandstand. Didn't gloat. That part matters. Because real power doesn't need theater. I spent 20 minutes walking them through exactly what happened. Pattern dependency failures. Compliance blind spots. Context misreads. No emotional speech. Just facts. Clean. Precise. Quiet. At one point, Alaric asked, were these concerns documented previously? I slid a folder across the table. Celine's face changed instantly. Because she recognized it. My original risk assessment report. Time-stamped. Ignored. The room went very still. That silence? That's the sound of careers ending. Celine tried once. Just once. The transition timeline created difficult pressures. Alaric cut her off without even raising his voice. You dismissed the safeguards. Not angry. Worse. Disappointed. That room suddenly felt very cold. I noticed Celine stop making eye contact after that. 2 weeks later, she resigned. Officially, it was framed as leadership restructuring. Corporate language again. Always trying to dress up disasters in business casual. The company rehired portions of my old team. Not under me. That was the interesting part. Because by then, I didn't want the old job anymore. I consulted temporarily, helped stabilize operations, then left on my own terms 3 months later. Started working with a smaller logistics firm outside Milwaukee. Less flashy. Better people. Turns out being respected is actually pretty good for your blood pressure. A few months after everything settled, Morel and I were sitting outside this little lakeside restaurant near Kenosha. Cold air. Quiet water. String lights overhead. She looked at me over her drink and said, you know what kills Celine the most? What? You never begged. I smiled a little at that. Because she was right. People expect collapse when they push you down long enough. They expect panic. Anger. Desperation. But sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is stay calm long enough for someone to reveal who they really are. And sometimes, you don't have to destroy people. You just have to let them uninterruptedly demonstrate their own brilliance.